All right. I think we're having some technical difficulties, but um, we're going to go ahead and get started. I think we're ready to go. And when Laura gets back connected, we'll let her take over. From there, again, welcome everyone to today's media advocacy training based on our Power Prism for Voices for Healthy Kids and what we use. My name is Joshua Harris. Um, I am Senior Communications Manager for Voices for Healthy Kids and the NCIT here. Excited to have everyone joining us. And we're going to get started here. If you can go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about today's objectives. Now, many of you may know and may have participated in some of our other trainings, but here at Voices for Healthy Kids, we use the Power Prism, an advocacy framework created by My Power People LLC. The Power Prism is a framework that is a step-by-step plan that will help you to recognize and act on opportunities to build momentum to any campaign for change. Today, we're going to focus on media advocacy, and one of the advocacy tools in the Power Prism framework. In future sessions, we will present on other tools in the Power Prism. And at the end of the session, there will be more time or will be time for questions. So if you have questions, jot them down. Feel free to post them in the chat. And then towards the end, we'll give you an opportunity to raise your hand and have those questions answered. Uh, Next slide, please. What you're going to take away. Um, Participants will build upon what you've already learned about the Power Prism, adding those tactical skills specifically to the area of media advocacy. And so see here, an understanding of what media advocacy looks like through the Power Prism model, knowledge of steps for planning, what kind of advocacy should be included, research, development, and then methods and tools for media outreach and coverage. Next slide. Just a reminder about this resource. You can visit the website for additional tools and ideas on how you can use the Power Prism. Equity and racial justice. Let's talk about it. In conversations about racism and racial equity, and specifically health equity, many terms are used often interchangeably. And being clear in your language and ensuring that you have a good internal grasp of what these concepts mean can make your conversations even more powerful. Keep in mind that terms mean different things to different people. When you use a term in conversation, also describe what you mean. These terms also change over time, and impacted communities may prefer to use different language. So be sure to work with your community coalition to shape your conversation. And um, be sure to work with your community in general for any advocacy campaign that you're working on, to make sure that that informs how you use these terms. Um, so just really quickly, the definition of health inequities is used by Voices for Healthy Kids. Differences in health status of different population groups. These inequities have significant social and economic costs for both individuals and society. This definition of racial justice used by Voices for Healthy Kids, the systematic fair treatment of people of all races, resulting in equitable opportunities and outcomes for all. Racial justice is the absence of discrimination and inequities in the presence of systems and supports to achieve and sustain racial equity. The definition of racial equity used by Voices for Healthy Kids: racial equity would occur when a person is no more or less likely to experience society's benefits or problems because of skin color. Racial inequity is when two or more racial groups are not standing on approximately equal footing. Racial equity is also described as a condition that will be achieved for one's racial identity no longer predicting how one fares. This includes elimination of policy, practices, and attitudes, and cultural messages that reinforce different outcomes predicted by race. What are ways that your definition of health inequities, racial equity, and racial justice are the same or different? Take a moment to think about that. But these definitions and others can be found on the Voices for Healthy Kids Racial Equity and Public Policy Guide. Um, just so that you have an idea and a baseline set of how we are framing the conversation around racial equity and racial justice. All right. Equity. All right. Equity-centered focus. It's important to acknowledge that a number of policies that public interest advocates have fought for on behalf of historically oppressed communities have failed or made things worse. The important words in that sentence are on behalf of. When we find ourselves advocating on behalf of a community or constituency without active participation at all stages of a campaign, we may find that the need for change and proposed solution implementation plans and evaluation measures miss the mark because they did not come from within the community, but from outside it. Here's an example. Lots of times advocates work to secure state appropriations for some important programs or intervention. That state agency may be responsible for administering the funds, may use a competitive grant process to determine. Oh, am I breaking up? Uh-oh. You guys hear me?
You're a little choppy, but we can hear you right now.
Okay. All right. Good. Sorry about that. Comcast is to blame. I'm just kidding. All right. So that state agency may be responsible for administering the funds and may use competitive grant process to determine where the funds go. As long as applications come from organizations, cities, and towns with the resources to hire skilled grant writers, the money flows to those applicants that have the best application when in fact the communities most in need of those resources either didn't have the time or people to devote to writing an excellent application, or worse, they didn't even learn about the opportunity. Alternatively, had the agency included residents and aligned organizations from the communities most impacted by the issue the funds were intended to address, the application process where the opportunity was promoted and in the languages and review criteria might have been quite different. Instead, we may have actually increased the disparities between the communities with plentiful resources and those with fewer resources. In a perfect world, the advocates and lawmakers framing the budget request would have done so with their active inclusion of the people most impacted by this issue, offering specific guidance around the application criteria needed. Laura?
Hi, everyone. Are you able to hear me? I'm sorry, I've been having some issues with audio.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to stay like this if this is okay. I'm usually on camera, but trying to take it one step at a time. So, thank you, Joshua and Katie. I'm sure you all have already introduced yourselves. Really quickly, I'm Laura Coleman, and I'm going to go into 3 key questions when it concerns media advocacy. So, this is everything every day you do as an advocate should be informed and guided by your answers to these 3 questions. Next slide. So these questions are, what do you want? Meaning, what is the policy change you are seeking to address your issue? Why do you want it? Which is, what data makes a case for that policy change? And who has the power to give it to you? So which specific decision makers have the power to make that change? So as we look at the Power Prism, we know that it's to build more power for your mission by using any and all of these 6 power tools. Next slide. And today we are going to be talking about none other than media advocacy. So media advocacy is the tool, in which you influence decision makers to think and act differently about an issue that matters to you through the media outlets that matter to them. Next. So what is media advocacy? So media advocacy is a way to influence decision makers through media coverage in a way that takes a point of view. So it often exposes a problem we're seeking to fix. Think of those 3 questions. It spotlights a solution we seek to implement. It celebrates one of our allies while tying into our advocacy goals, and it challenges one of our opposing forces. So let's talk about what is the value of media advocacy. So we're informing the public about the systemic culprits of health problems and community issues. And we're also gaining opportunities for community members to share their experience and leadership on issues. We're creating urgency around issues to inspire more involvement. And this is the key value. Apply pressure to those decision makers and never feel like applying this type of pressure is too bad. Let's go to the next slide. So media advocacy planning. So that third key question was, who has the power to give it to you? So we want to identify media that key decision makers are able to follow. So you might ask staff which media outlets key decision makers pay attention to, and do some sleuthing on social media and repeat as key decision makers start to change. So in other words, what this means is, I don't know if everybody knows this term, but I like to use the term lurking around. Look and see if you have a key decision maker that may like X or Twitter, but then you might have another one that is very heavily involved on Facebook. So make sure as your decision makers change, you follow their social channels to see what do they prefer the most. Next slide. Look at previous media coverage, very important. So you want to get a sense of previous reporting. How has this issue been portrayed before? Who is speaking in support? Who is opposing this issue? What are ways that issues might need to be reframed or advanced? And which reporters are reporting on issues like this? Again, this kind of ties back to that last slide about sleuthing around, looking to see what has been talked about as far as this issue, how you can make that change. And also, if you find a reporter that's talking about an issue or is portraying a certain issue, make sure you're following which media outlets that they are also very big on having a following on. Next slide. So we want to create a media list, very important. Develop a robust media contact list ready when campaign needs it. And I want to stop before I go into the next bullet when I say creating this media list. There are endless possibilities to this list. I want to make sure that we all know that, meaning you don't have to have a media list of 3 key people and think, well, this is not enough. Something is better than nothing. And sometimes it's better to have quality over quantity. So if you have a good media list of 10 people, that can make a world of difference if you have a media list of 100 people. So coalition partners may already have a media list to share for the purposes of the campaign. Again, people that are in your coalition might also have some key people on their media list. And of course, you can combine those two. You also want to ask coalition partners about any personal relationships with the media. Do they know the media? Do they know someone that knows the media? Make sure you network within your coalition, and you'll find out a lot more than you thought. And always, always, always include those social media handles. Always, always, always. In other words, that's make sure you're tagging and adding when you're on social media. That's fine. Could we go back to that slide really quickly? Really quickly, I want to mention what the media list should actually include. Just that first bullet, we don't have to go over all of it, but where it says newspapers, television, radio, social media outlets, and blogs, these are just the most simplest terms of a media list. If you know any other media outlet, you can add that as well. But I was mentioning social media a lot, but I wanted to make sure that you all know that you can branch out to other things. If radio is popular in your area, if television is popular, those media lists can include all of that. Next slide. So now we're going to identify some campaign experts. So issue expertise and some lived expertise. So let's plot out legislative and campaign events. So plotting out the legislative and special events calendars of coalition partners will help generate a coordinated plan to engage media to apply that pressure to decision makers that I mentioned earlier. So let's look at a legislative calendar. It should include deadlines for submitting any bills, deadlines for bills to be reported out of a committee, and legislative recesses. So make sure you're following along what's going on in the legislative office. So partner events calendar should include your special events like your fundraisers, legislative events like lobby days, annual events like report releases, awareness month, etc. And so what I like to call those partnering events for your calendar are more so of your volunteer events, your boots on the ground events, where it's not as formal as maybe trying to make sure you're keeping up with what's going on in the legislature. Next slide. So we want to research your opposition. Earlier, I talked about how when you're kind of sleuthing around to see are reporters or anybody on television or radio hosts who is talking about your campaign or who's talking about what you're trying to propose, there are people who are going to oppose what you are trying to do, and that's completely normal. What you want to do is research them. So it is critical to understand who might oppose your campaign and the kinds of arguments that they will use. And this can help you think about how to reframe those arguments in your media advocacy or pick effective messages. So your opposition, an example could be anti-tax groups or industry groups, just anybody that may not understand the role of structural racism. Messengers, issue experts who study tax policy, supportive business and school leaders, and those with lived experience who most directly impacted by health inequity and proposed policy, and community leaders. So we don't have to get into this too deeply, but I do want to kind of talk about this media advocacy planning tool. You don't have to write it down because I do believe you will receive this information afterwards, but this is just one of those quick tools that you can pull out when you are trying to map out your campaign and your media advocacy efforts, where you talk about your campaign goal, your goals for your media activity, who are the decision makers you're trying to influence, what's their social handles if you're writing that down, and what forms of media have you been noticing that's talking about your target decision makers, and what makes the news? What is the timing of your media activity and why? So something very short and sweet planning tool that you all can use. Next slide.
All right. Let's talk about developing stories and cultivating our spokespeople. One of the very critical components of building any media advocacy campaign is the importance of understanding how to do that. Next slide, please. And so first thing we have to do is outline what our goals are and make a plan. Each time you plan a media activity, you should start by asking, what is the goal of this media activity, and how does it advance my campaign goal? Keeping this in mind, it will help you to stay focused on your media targets, the message, and the messengers. It's about getting your issue into the press in a way that provokes new or different thinking. And it's about getting that issue into the press that is read, watched, and listened to by your target audience, preferably a target audience with some decision makers in it. Next slide. Now, what are the components of a compelling message? Of course, a compelling message helps us to paint a big picture and answers the questions. What is the problem? Why should anyone care about this? What is the solution? What is the ask, or what can your audience do about it? Why is it urgent? What is the hope coming out of this campaign? Example, too many kids in US schools are distracted in the classroom, but it might not be for the reason you assume. It's not due to texting with friends or because of viral videos on social media. No, their bellies are to blame. Did you know that 1 in 6 US families faces food insecurity, and that means millions of kids can't focus on their studies because they're thinking about the last time that they ate, or they're worried about that the next time that they'll be able to. We can fix that by incorporating universal school meals, including on-campus breakfast and lunch for our students. Can I count on you to support our mission so we can help all kids for success? You see how we did that? We painted the picture and put all those components into that message, which ended, of course, with identifying and leaving some hope. And the hope in that was setting all kids up for success. Next slide, please. Framing your message. Once you know which media outlets you're going to target, because we've made that list, because Laura went through earlier, we made a list of our media contacts. Think about how you're going to frame your issue. When we get our issue covered by relevant media in a way that supports our advocacy goals, framing the problem or our proposed solution to our campaign is more likely to succeed when we do this effectively. Essentially, it means framing your issue in a way that makes it newsworthy or relevant, showing how your issue impacts people, real people, and showcasing the momentum or support for your issue. To be effective, this must be done in a way that the media outlet that is most important to your key decision makers. And so sometimes in smaller markets, there are unique outlets that you may know that all lawmakers or decision makers may pay close attention to. And with that, understanding how to frame your message, media advocacy rarely feels like a big hug. And sometimes when it's done, it makes people feel really uncomfortable and it highlights a controversy and to prompt decision makers to think and act differently about an issue that's important to you and your campaign. Media advocacy is not about getting your name or organization's name in the press. It's about getting your issue into the press in a way that provokes new or different thinking. Next slide, please. As part of framing that message, you have to be able to develop media-worthy stories and understand what are the components of those stories. Successful campaigns are not only develop messages, they create media-worthy stories that help to reach and convince decision makers. Because at the end of the day, it's how do we move someone to align with what our values and beliefs are for that campaign. Campaign managers are those in charge of campaign communications will need to strategize how to make the story of the campaign and things that happen along the way newsworthy. There are a lot of great storytelling tools out there that you can use. And we're also happy to help you to identify those tools here at Voices and count us as a resource to help you do just that. And so all media-worthy stories must have 5 elements. They must be personal and explain how a person's life is impacted by a situation. Relatable. Is there something in the story that people can connect to by imagining what would do what they would do if this happened to them? It must be surprising. Well, what about this situation is different than what people might assume or expect? It should be relevant. Is the story connected to or related to something currently happening locally or in your state or in the country? And timely. What makes now a good time to tell this story? Is there an urgency for it? Is there legislation that's moving? Is there a particular reason that this is extremely timely? And those are the 5 components of developing media-worthy stories. Next slide, please. All right, building relevance to your target media. As you think about your message and the media outreach, it's important to ask yourself, what makes this news or media outlets, decision makers care about this? There are producers who are looking for stories daily and understanding what separates your story from any other emails that they get. We are in competition with those stories to get producers to pay attention to what we send to them. An event that has a draw because of location, who's attending, or what's happening. As you plan your events, think about how to add power to the draw based on the location, where you're going to hold it at. You could host it at an important location within the district of your target lawmaker, which probably means it could be a draw for a local paper or key decision makers to care about. Can you invite someone who may be intriguing to the media? Is there a celebrity or pseudo celebrity that also cares about this issue that could grab media's attention? New local information that will matter to readers and viewers. This could be many things. New data that reveals something about the community's health or experiences, a report that was recently released, or an external event that impacts what happens to a community or group, or anything else that is something new or surprising that reporters may want to share with readers and viewers. Relevance due to local organization. Um, if a local organization or advocate is involved with the campaign, reporters might want to feature them and their work. Once you know your target media outlets, you want to be thinking about which organizations and advocates live in those areas and will be willing to speak to the media or share their story. And then, of course, tailoring your message to the target media audience. Different audiences require different messaging. For example, messages for progressive audiences may be very different than for a conservative one. This is where your media research will be very helpful. Understanding the background of an outlet or newspaper that you're working with and who their audience or demographic typically is. Uh, what has that media outlet printed in the past about your issue? Has it changed or evolved over time? And who are the messengers or personal stories that would resonate? Remember, the ultimate goal is to persuade lawmakers through this media coverage of an issue. So think about who your key decision makers are and what they will respond to. Next slide. Considering your messengers, I think that this one kind of speaks for itself. It's important to understand who will be the best messenger for your campaign and identify those people. And make sure that they're prepared and willing to do media advocacy work. First and foremost, it's important to have at least one personal impact story that you can share with the media to say that this is how it impacts the everyday lived experiences of people. And someone who can share and is willing to share that story around this campaign issue. That's what makes it resonate with individuals the same way. It's different telling someone's story versus them telling their story. But you also need to think about who your your spokespeople will be for any media coverage. It may be you, but there may be others in your organization or your coalition that may be most effective in conveying your issues to the press. Or it may be a coalition partner that's located in the decision maker's district. Amplifying a relevant voice can make or break a campaign. Next slide. Our community, our health, our voice. I want to really focus on the importance of community. It is critical for all campaigns to pause and make sure that there is a community voice in the policy work intended to solve issues within those communities. It's very important that we do not overlook every capacity building opportunity, including media advocacy. We want to ensure that the community voice is heard. This is especially true for those opportunities that can build one's ability to be a better advocate into the future. Some cases, this may require multilingual outreach and other translation services. So think about compensating a community-based partner to assist in strategizing and executing those efforts. Community-based organizations and voices are critical in media advocacy as strategists and spokespeople and should be a part of this work. Next slide. Highlight personal stories. We kind of touched on this a little bit, and I won't spend too much time on the slide when we talked about understanding who the best messengers are. And so understanding and identifying who the best messengers are, there may be individuals who have really good personal stories that may be worth sharing with the media that will make your campaign message much more compelling because of that personal story. Next slide. Portrait versus landscape. Ensuring that when you highlight these personal stories, you provide context, right? Personal stories are impactful, but we have to be careful that we don't make the story a portrait of an individual that is the hero or villain in our story. We need to expand upon the frame to show that the environment around the person that contributed to the success or hindered to the progress, right? That's what creates the landscape. We see this all the time. We love to read a weight loss story, the person who overcame the odds and start a successful business. But when we focus solely on the individual, we run the risk of leading people to think that anyone can have this outcome if they just work hard enough. Instead, We need to use this as an opportunity to tell a bigger story around the systems and the environment that are influencing the individual. That makes a difference and expands upon how we frame our story, laying out the landscape. Next slide, please. Another opportunity is to include youth advocates in our media outreach. Oftentimes, youth voices are not included, but leaders in community love to see youth included in outreach and advocacy efforts. Not to mention, it's also an opportunity for us to develop the next generation of advocates and leaders. And so we're introducing them into what advocacy and media advocacy looks like. But don't overlook the opportunity to include youth in your campaign advocacy. Next slide. Providing training for spokespeople. Advocates who are willing to be spokespeople may feel more confident to speak with media if they have training. This can be done one-on-one or with the group. We are happy to assist you in your organization in doing spokespeople training and developing bullet points or a message box to make sure that your spokespeople are prepared to always come back to a core principle of your campaign and teaching how to pivot when dealing with the media. And so making sure that your spokespeople are trained is important. They just need to be experts in their own experience, not necessarily in this issue. And that will help to share or help to expand and add that personal touch to how the spokespeople are able to message around your campaign. Next slide. Contacting the media. There are many ways and reasons to reach out to the media, and advocates should use media advocacy as a way to influence key decision makers. And so when we get our issues covered in relevant media in ways that supports our advocacy goals by framing the problem and our proposed solution, our campaigns are more likely to succeed. And media matters. It's very important. So it's also important to follow some of the media rules that we know. Contacting the media. There are many ways and reasons to reach out to the media and media advocates. You can go to the next slide. As a way to influence key decision makers, we have to make sure that we're using all outlets. We, of course, know that there are news tip email addresses where we can send or news desk. There's Twitter and social media that we can outreach. But we want to make sure that when we're reaching out, that it is newsworthy. Otherwise, we run the risk of reporters starting to ignore your outreach. So don't over reach out to reporters in the news unless you absolutely know that your campaign and something that you're working on is news worthy. We'll talk about some newsworthy events in our next slide. But in addition, it's helpful to plan your outreach to the media in ways that it's most likely to get traction. Like we mentioned earlier, research the outlets and see who covers your issue and what they have written about it in the past. Often outreach is not successful because the content is not what the journalist is interested in. I don't want to send something about health to the education reporter. And so understanding the dynamics of who we're sending our outreach to is important. Next slide, please. Newsworthy campaigns. The good news is that there can be a lot of events that make an issue newsworthy to reporters. Media doesn't always pick up a story the first time that you contact them. So don't be discouraged. Often you will need to keep finding ways that media outlets might find your issue interesting. Sometimes it's just a matter of how you make it seem newsworthy. And we mentioned maybe tying it to a location or having a specific person, celebrity or local celebrity or influencer, to participate in a way that would attract the media outlets there. When events that you create or events that just happen related to your issue, you can reach back out to media contacts with new information and a retailored press release with related quotes from campaign partners. And so that can include a bill that is posed for a vote in the legislature, campaign advocacy, or campaign is holding an advocacy day or awareness event related. A similar bill passes in another state or cities with lawmakers. Media in another region covers the issue favorably. These are all opportunities that you can use to reach out to media again and reframe your issue. So don't just pay attention to what's happening locally. Look at what may be happening in other news markets or other states and say, hey, this happened here. And you can use that to raise awareness around your issue to the media as to why it's relevant. Next slide, please. Useful tools. I think that media advisories or press advisories and statements are important. Press releases, editorial board meetings. Lots of people don't realize that there are editorial boards that make up our news outlets, and you can reach out to them and schedule a meeting with them to just do an introduction around the issues that you're prioritizing. You can also do letters to the editor. Those letters to the editor can be in response to a article or story that was published recently, and the same thing with op-eds and or columns. And so I think that these are some of just a few of the tools that you can use when you're doing outreach to the press. Next slide, please. Diversify, diversify, diversify. It's important to contact diverse media outlets, right? And you can use that to leverage the opportunity to say, well, this media outlet covered, maybe you might be interested in it as well, or it may impact a particular demographic. Diverse outlets are inclusive of communities of color and audiences whom English is not their primary language. And so we are happy to share some of the tools that you can use for identifying diverse media outlets. And you should do this when you're doing your research on what media to do outreach to. Of course, we know that there's usually a core, the mainstream, but what are those other identifying maybe smaller outlets that in communities that we may not be thinking about? And that helps us to prioritize, of course, that diversity, equity, and inclusion of the media outreach. Next slide. Thank the media and offer yourself as a resource. Oftentimes we will get a story published or a story ran, and we're excited and we share with our members and we push it out, we amplify, and we never think to reach back out to that producer or that reporter to help to build that bridge to say thank you. I once worked for an organization where our director of communications would send a particular reporter their favorite beer just every once in a while, just to say thank you. And they didn't always cover our stories, but if they weren't interested in it, they would help direct us to the right person who can help get something published. And so having those relationships is extremely important. So remember to say thank you. Next slide. Using social media to amplify the media successes. Kind of just touched on this a little bit. You get something covered in a story. Don't just let that be the end of it, that it is published, but use your resources. You can spread the word. You can send out email blasts. You can share it on social media. You can even do an op-ed as a follow-up to the story and then try to get that published. And it's a good opportunity also to use it to identify additional key spokespeople that can help to amplify your story and share the articles or news that gets published about your issue. And so those are just some of the ways that we can use to really identify how we target and frame our messaging around media advocacy. Katie?
Thanks, Joshua. Hi, everyone. I am Katie Bishop Kendrick. I am one of the National Senior Advocacy Consultants with Voices for Healthy Kids. I work primarily with our nutrition security campaign. So the campaign's focused on policies around nutrition security. And while Joshua and Laura are the experts on media advocacy, the consultants work with campaigns on all of the areas of the Power Prism, and then we pull in Joshua and Laura as needed. And so for the last section of our webinar, we're going to focus on building power with media advocacy. So how to use your media advocacy events to support the other areas of your campaign. So next slide. So at its core, the Power Prism is a framework for recognizing and acting on opportunities to build momentum in advocacy campaigns. And just as a quick clarifier, when we're talking about internal campaign events, we're talking about events that we have control over. So things that we're doing as part of our campaign work or strategy. And then external campaign events are things that happen. They could be good or bad that happen outside of our control. So this could be something like an editorial that's issued on the issue you're working on, passage or failure of similar legislation in another state, or proposed funding cuts. And with the Power Prism, it's really a common sense framework that prompts advocates to stop and think for any campaign event, whether it's internal and we control it, or external and it's something that just pops up, on how to expand the power of the campaign through activating any or all of the 6 advocacy tools of the Power Prism, rather than working in a linear step-by-step fashion. And too often organizations move from point A to point B within the advocacy campaign without considering other opportunities to build power and get more out of a single campaign event. And so on the next slide, we're going to walk through an example of this. So on this slide, you see a pretty linear plan for holding a press conference around releasing new data. And this plan focuses solely on media advocacy. So drafting a press release, distributing the release, pitching the story to certain reporters, responding to questions from media, and then the story either runs or it doesn't run. And this isn't bad. All of these elements are essential for media advocacy, but they exist in isolation from the rest of the campaign. And so we're missing a lot of opportunities if we're only thinking about media advocacy when we're doing a media advocacy focused event. And so on the next slide, we're going to look through an example of this, a plan for the same event, but when we're thinking about all of the areas of the Power Prism. So when drafting the press release, including quotes from community members, coalition members, the decision maker who filed the legislation, this expands to be including coalition management, grassroots, and decision maker advocacy. When we're thinking about the outlets to share the press release with, think about who your key decision makers are, and if there are any additional outlets you'd want to include because of those decision makers. So are there outlets that specifically cover their district, or that the decision maker or their staff read every day? By including those outlets in your outreach, it's more likely that the article will get in front of the key decision maker. So on the next slide, so let's say your article does get published. The opportunity to build power in the campaign hasn't stopped there. So now you can think about, how do you use the event of the article getting published to further leverage your campaign? So you could use this as an opportunity to do a follow-up letter to the editor. You could send appreciative emails from grassroots community members. So this brings in grassroots. You could share the story with your grassroots, your grass tops, your coalition members, even funders, which brings in grassroots and coalition maintenance and fundraising. You could promote the story through social media, so you're bringing in grassroots again. You can distribute the published story to key decision makers with a note about how they can help, bringing in decision maker advocacy. So on the next slide, so not only can you use a media advocacy event like a press conference to build power for your campaign, you should always be thinking about how to use other campaign related events on ways to engage the media. And Joshua was talking about this earlier in the webinar. But the campaign should always be thinking about how could this campaign event help us influence key decision makers through the media? And would the media find this newsworthy? And would their coverage advance our cause? Next slide. And then another important thing to be thinking about is creating hero opportunities. So hero opportunities are ways that you and your campaign can make the decision makers who help you look good to their constituents, colleagues, and other interests they serve. There's great value in creating hero opportunities for your champions. I don't think any legislator is going to be upset about being publicly praised or thanked. And they're going to remember that in the future. So some things that you could do are to write a favorable opinion piece, letters to the editor, or an answer for their support. In your press releases, you could include a quote from your sponsor. You could put out favorable social media messages praising their leadership and thanking them. And again, your supporters for this campaign, if you build strong relationships with them and you do things like thanking them and putting things out in the public, they're going to build stronger relationships with them, which will extend beyond just this campaign, but into future campaigns as well. And so on the next slide, so it's also really important, with all of the areas of the Power Prism, but with media advocacy too, to be spending time on relationships. So creating relationships with both the media and also with your campaign messengers. It takes time and personal outreach, but it's really important for, again, both this campaign, but also campaigns in the future. So with reporters that you're trying to establish relationships with, if you see that they've put out an important piece, even if it's not on the issue area that you work on, send them a little note congratulating them on getting that piece out. If they're on social media, you can follow them and you can share their stories, if it's appropriate for your audiences. And with advocates, if you do have folks that have shared their personal story with you, follow up with them personally with a phone call, with a handwritten note, or at least an email. And if they're interested in becoming a spokesperson and sharing their story with the media, treat them and their story with care. So never share it without their permission. And while you have many competing demands on your time, taking the time to personally reach out is critical. And the relationships are, again, so important for this campaign, but also for campaigns in the future. And it's incredibly important to be getting those stories out there that use the framing that you want for your campaign. And then just one other key thing about relationships, and you'll remember Laura mentioned this earlier, but you might have key partners or coalition members that already have relationships with people in the media, and make sure you ask them about those potential relationships and whether they'd be willing to reach out to their contacts on behalf of the campaign. So then on the next slide, so this is an example of a grantee that I'm working with right now. So this grantee is working to eliminate the Nebraska lifetime SNAP ban for people with certain past drug convictions. And a couple of months ago, Heart Ministry Center, Rise, and Nebraska Appleseed held a media event to draw attention to their campaign. And not only did they use the campaign to advance media advocacy, but they also incorporated a bunch of other Power Prism tools in their event. So for grassroots, they included a speaker with lived experience, and they released a video with stories of others impacted by the current policy. And they also went through a very deliberate process to make sure the folks that were sharing their stories felt comfortable with how they were being shared. For coalition maintenance, they included quotes from multiple coalition members in their press release, and they had them speak at the event. For decision maker advocacy, they included a congressman who filed similar legislation at the federal level. And while, of course, the whole event was focused on media advocacy, an additional element that a lot of folks might not think of is that they created a phrase guide for media. So they noticed that a lot of the stories that were coming out about this issue or similar issues were perpetuating stereotypes. So they created this phrase guide to help the media use first-person language and to stop continuing those stereotypes. So it's been really great to work with this campaign, and wanted to just highlight some of the great work that they have been doing. So on the next slide, just want to share some of the great media advocacy resources that we have to share. On the next slide, we have a lot of tools and resources on our website, including past trainings, messaging guides, and other resources to help you with planning and executing your media advocacy in your campaign. On the next slide, we do have a bunch of issue-specific toolkits with fact sheets and other issues, resources specific to that issue. And then on the next slide, we have a whole bunch of success stories where you can learn about other campaigns that are on your specific issues, or learn lessons from other campaigns and other issue areas. And then on the next slide, Also just wanted to touch on some of the other areas of technical assistance that Voices can provide. We have a whole bunch of different areas, all of the areas of the Power Prism, translation services, subject matter expertise. On the next slide, if you want to take advantage of the technical assistance, you just click here. We'll send this link out in follow-up. It is free to take advantage of any of the technical assistance. You just provide a little bit of information about your campaign, and a consultant will reach out to you to set up a quick call. And then finally, just circling back to media advocacy. Media advocacy takes work, but you are building power for your campaign in ways that'll pay off in every aspect of your work. And building those relationships with the media now will last well beyond this legislative cycle. And building the capacity among advocates and community members to conduct media advocacy benefits advocacy work far beyond this campaign. So thank you all. I think we have a few minutes left for questions.
Any questions?
The slides will be sent out in an email. I saw that question in the chat.
Hi, I have a question. My name is Shannon. Hello. A great example. I really loved hearing about just the guide, which is a really great idea as well. And I was just wondering, when you're thinking about putting together press kits and other such, what do you consider when putting that together as a leave behind?
Just for clarification, when you say a press kit as a leave behind, what do you mean for advocates or for lawmakers or
Oh
for
no, sorry, I used
press?
the language accidentally interchangeably. More like the press kit. So like it's something that when the media shows up to a media event, do you recommend having like a binder there for them to take away, or maybe a couple pages of information to pass out to the media, to take home with them as they write their article? Maybe they can have better resources, clarification.
Yeah, I think that you should definitely have your one pager that you have. You should have a copy of your press release that was sent out, because they'll use that to reference and identify who the speakers were based on the video or notes that they took. So a copy of your press release, your one pager in the background around the campaign, and then maybe a link or information or QR code for more information around the campaign. I will say you don't want to go into overkill, because what happens is a lot of reporters, they have to change beats often, or they've come from a new market and they're not experts in whatever field that they're in. And so you want to keep it short, simple, so that they can get like the high level understanding of enough to be able to put their story together, but also provide them with more if they want more information so that they can follow up. Does that make sense? Greg.
Thank you.
And just a couple of other things from the chat. One is Voices does have a company that we can work with on translation services. So if you do have like a specific fact sheet or something like that, you can reach out to us and we can get that translated into a whole bunch of different languages. And I also wanted to note one of the comments about making sure that your legislator would want to be publicly thanked. If it is a contentious issue, they might prefer to work behind the scenes. So important to take that into consideration. And I know there are a few other questions in here. Maybe we can answer those in the follow-up that we send out to folks.
Yes.
And Joshua, do you want to close us out?
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to our Power Prism training on media advocacy. We appreciate it. And remember that we are here as a resource for you all to help you if you have questions. You can feel free to email us. You can email me directly at joshua.harris@heart.org. And we are happy to assist you as you build out your campaigns and identify ways that you can most effectively maximize your media advocacy. And Andrea, do we have a closing out survey, or is it just the opening survey?
We will have a survey in the follow-up email.
Okay, great, great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. You all have a great day.